Well, hello, Team Healthy. I got Wednesday here on my calendar. Hope that's what you got on. Well, you folks down in New Zealand and Australia, I don't know what day it is. I guess it's already Thursday by now. Some of you folks are actually listening live from down there. More power to you. I'm a morning person. I'm not the night owl. But if you're a night owl, about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning there in New Zealand, Australia, welcome. Glad to have you. Those of you who are from Pennsylvania and California and UK and down there in Brazil and all the rest. We're all over the place. That's what Team Healthy is, and you know what, I'm just so thrilled that we have what we have, and I appreciate your contributions to what we do here. Okay, so most of you know that what I do on Wednesdays is I have fielded questions from you throughout the week. So now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be repeating back to you some of the questions you've asked me, and this allows me to kind of get to know who you are a little bit more fully. But there are times when I make videos that I'm going to be discussing broader topics that are going to be germane to a wider swath of individuals. And sometimes the questions here can allow me to go a little bit more narrow in the scope of my comments, and so that can help you just in that regard. So y'all know I thoroughly enjoy these Wednesdays, and I thoroughly enjoy hearing from you. I keep an eye on you guys that are over here, talking to each other in the chat space. Most of you are going to be watching tape delayed. And so I'm glad that you are able to get in on whatever time suits you. So just know I'm pleased with you. And I just thoroughly enjoy you being Team Healthy and you allowing me to be a leader here on Team Healthy. That's what we're trying to do. Just kind of taking this aside, I was talking to a real good friend of mine, and one of the things that he was lamenting, and I didn't disagree with him, is there's just so much out there that we have to contend with. It just makes no sense. Why do we have to put up with this? Now, the why question can take us a long time to chase down, but the bottom line is somebody needs to decide. Well, in this routine, somebody needs to be the flag bearer for healthiness and decency, and that's what we're going to do here. And so, I like to have a theme that I work with that describes this week's questions. And so today, I'm talking about the theme of how do narcissists process life. One of the things you notice when you engage with that narcissistic person and you're watching how they respond and how they set themselves up and how they just talk and act in general, it's like there's something off here. At least with respect to the way I do things, and hopefully I'm trying to do things in a healthy way, they don't think the same as you and me. They've got their own little internal dialogue that takes them into directions and decisions that just make no good sense, but there they are. The task for you and me is to be wise enough to know what's going on so that when they come along and say, yeah, and if there's a problem, it certainly isn't me because it has to be you. You and I are going to know differently, and we're not going to get suckered into that kind of justification. Okay, so that being the case, let's just dive right in with our first question of the day. And again, those of you who have asked these questions, thank you for sending them in. Put your questions if you have new ones in the comments section, and I'll pick up on them, and we'll go next week. Okay, the first person asked, I'd like to know if they really ever forget you and just move on. I'm in no contact, but he tries to hoover me without success. I think he probably has a new supply. In fact, I suspect he had it while trying to hoover me back. I'm worried because I cannot stop thinking about him. I guess my trauma bond is strong. Okay, first of all, we kind of have our own little language here and in terms. When we talk about hoovering, what does that mean? Uh, some genius, probably 16 years old, I don't know, came up with the idea that there's this thing called a Hoover vacuum cleaner, and when you are doing the vacuum cleaner, it's sucking in all of that dirt. And so when a narcissist is hoovering you, they're just trying to suck you right back in. That's what we refer to as hoovering. So this person is basically saying that the narcissist has moved on. This person is in no contact. And yet there are times when that person will hoover. That's extremely common. By the way, there's another thing we want to get to, another term. We call it breadcrumbing. Sometimes when they're trying to get you back, they'll just kind of toss out a little positive, something like, well, I did something last week that I know you really enjoy. I went to this kind of event, or I talked to this person. Um, I know you'd like to do something like that, wouldn't you? And so they'll try to drop these little breadcrumbs so that you'll kind of come talking back to them. What's going on there? Do narcissists just have don't have not have the ability to just cut it clean? Now, some will do exactly that. Once they are finished with you, you won't hear from them again. They will go completely incommunicado, and so it's not as though they all do the exact same thing. But sometimes what they'll do is they'll just play with you. Let's keep in mind that narcissists think in highly competitive ways, and they're desperate to think, well, I can't possibly be the loser if the relationship has come down, and so I've got to make you to look like the loser. I have to feel like the winner. So one of the things I'm going to do, and this is them playing games with themselves every bit as much as they're playing games with you, if I can convince you and therefore myself that I still have a whole lot more desirability left, there's a lot more gas in my tank. You just didn't get to spend it all. You'd probably like to be around me. I know that, but too bad. I'm not. I'm off the market, at least as far as you're concerned. They like to play that kind of game, and so from time to time, if you see them, they can sidle up next to you and say, "Hey, how's it going? I sure do miss you, and I hope everything's great." And you're thinking, "Wow, this person's being really friendly." But that's part of the hoovering, trying to suck you back in because they really need you to think what a nice person you are. Even in rejection, you're still a nice person, and so it's their way of trying to mess with you. It's a form of gaslighting. They're trying to keep you in a confused state, but really they're trying to convince themselves, I'm the better person here. I'm the good catch, and so. Narcissists will attach and then they'll try to reattach to you only if they feel like there's any kind of utility left in you. And so sometimes just toying with you, it's its own form of utility. Makes me feel good. It allows me to declare myself the winner and you the loser. And really, all it comes down to is one big, huge realization, and that is these people are game players. They play games with you because they play games with themselves, and they're specifically playing games with the truth. They can't be honest. They're messing with you, and so when you've pulled way back from that narcissistic person and then that person kind of throws some of the breadcrumbs your way or tries to let you know things really were a lot better with me than you're trying to depict. Don't buy it. Remember why you had to go back, because in a very, very high percentage of the cases the narcissist isn't going to make the necessary adjustments. Every now and then when I say that, less than 5% of the time when a narcissist when a person would break up with a really strongly narcissistic person, the narcissist can make some pretty strong adjustments. If a person is going to truly make some change, it tends to be in moments of crisis, and so sometimes they can fool you and let you know I've hit my rock bottom and I'm going to make some healthy adjustments. But one of the signs that it's not hoovering is they're also going to say, and if you choose not to accompany me on my journey, I get it because of what I've done. I'm not going to make any kind of requirements. Usually that's a good sign if they say that. If they're saying, come on, you need to come along with me, then that's a sign that says, I'm still trying to be in control, so don't buy into that. But that's just a very common thing that they do. Now, this next one, and this is an interesting one. Dr. C, will you address those of us raised by narcissistic parents who only affirmed us if we demonstrated traits of narcissism ourselves, yet I never felt comfortable treating other people that way? Okay, so as I'm trying to figure out where this person is coming from, let's suppose that you, the child, let's say you're a teenager, and you've had a disagreement with a friend, and so you go home and you say something to mom and dad, and they say, "Well, you know what? If that's the way it works, then you just need to make them feel sorry for ever coming against you, and they can try to teach you to be combative and confrontive and dismissive, that kind of thing." Or it may be that mom and dad will teach you to have elitist attitudes. We're better than others, and you are too. And let's suppose that you're hearing these kinds of teachings as a child, an adolescent, a young adult, and the older you get, the more you realize, I don't think the same as you, mom or dad. I don't really feel the need to do that. What's going on there, and can we make any kind of adjustments? One of the things, one of the age groups that I really enjoyed working with was people in their early adult years, uh, uh, especially once they've got a few years away from mom and dad, early 20s, all the way through the 20s and all. And this is when they're going into from my past. And many times I would have individuals who would say, mother was a real self-centered person, or dad was a very overbearing and domineering individual. And it's just that was my modeling, and that's what I came up with. And I see it and I don't like it. And one of the delights that I would have as a therapist would be to say, well, what are your thoughts? Which is something a narcissistic parent isn't going to ask. And so I would ask the young person, what are your thoughts? As you see mother or father being this way, what better alternatives would you pursue? Or what is it about you that you wish that they could understand that they did not? Or as you try to engage with people and truly seek healthy initiatives, what does healthiness mean to you? What traits does that imply? And what would you need to eliminate in terms of your patterns of interactions? What would you need to increase in your patterns of interaction? And we can do all this planning and discussion and compare and contrast with the past versus where they are. And one of the most interesting byproducts of that kind of conversation would be, let's say I'd have a 28-year-old or a 31-year-old, and they might say something to me like, I really feel like when I'm with my parents that I'm the healthier one in the equation now. And they realize they've already surpassed mom and dad in the maturity category. And that cuts against the way that we like to think of it to be, because we like to think that, when mom and dad age and they get into their senior years, then along with that comes accumulated knowledge. And then along with that comes wisdom, and they mellow out. But sometimes they just keep on being the same selfish and manipulative and critical and backstabbing kind of people that they always were. And you're observing, and it's like, no, I'm going a different path. And so you want to go ahead and give yourself permission to be separate, distinct, and then this is your way of reminding yourself. Just because I was under their influence doesn't mean that they establish everything about me. They were teaching me what they knew. And when a person lives with a really strong critical mindset, they teach criticism. If a person lives with hate towards the other, then they teach hate. If a person lives with being coy and manipulative and self revelations, that's what they teach there. And so they were coming towards you based on what they knew, and they had not advanced very far in their early adult years. And so I'm hoping that there can be a mindset that says, well, my branch of the family tree is going to go into a different direction. And as best you can, then you show the honor that you want them to have by virtue of their position in your life. But then if they keep on with their harsh and untenable ways, then you begin separating away. And that doesn't mean you don't honor them, but it just means we're just more and more different. And I'm going to acknowledge that in my behaviors and my priorities. So there are times when you have people that have played a very pivotal role in your life, but they didn't manage their end of the bargain very well. And I'm hoping you can decide, all loyalties aside, I'm going to give myself permission to be the healthier version of who I am. And if that means that I wind up not having the inner circle attitudes or position that I might otherwise have, then so be it. That's the cost I'm willing to pay. Okay. Okay. We have the holidays coming up. Let's see. Today's the November 13th. Okay. For those of you who are living in states or in countries outside of America, I guess it's 2 weeks from tomorrow, right? We're going to be having Thanksgiving Day. So we have our holiday season coming in, and then we have Christmas and the holiday seasons beyond that. Again, some of you have different traditions. I understand that and appreciate that. But this person asked, obviously anticipating that, this person says, would you address the dynamic in which a narcissist takes something good, for example, Thanksgiving dinner, and makes it very unpleasant. For example, bullying someone at the Thanksgiving table and harassing them the rest of the evening. And then gaslights others with something along the lines of, they're such terrible persons not to spend Thanksgiving with the family. Do any of you have that person in your family? I'm sitting here thinking, oh, we all have someone that it's like, you have to be good at something. And I'm a real good critic. Boy, there's hardly anybody better at that. I've perfected that. And so they prove it. And so when they're sitting at the table, they might criticize you. Well, why do you comb your hair like that? Or why do you have this color in your hair? Or why would you have this priority? Or I don't know that I would have done this. And you felt what? And so they can just keep coming after you with all sorts of negatives. What are you going to do? Well, let's just start by saying, what are you not going to do? And that is, consider the source. I'm not going to take it seriously. Yeah, they did it last year and the year before that and the year before that. And before I showed up, somebody else was the scapegoat. I happen to be it now. And so you want to mentally prepare yourself, whether it's your father-in-law or whether it's your brother-in-law or the sister that nobody likes. And you just kind of gear yourself up. And when they say, I don't like the fact that you did this, my comment is probably going to be something to the effect of, I'm very aware that you don't like that. That's all. I don't have to convince. And a lot of times that minimalist response can shut them down. Or if they just say something like, I don't even know why you would make a decision that you made, then I might say something like, yes, I realize that. And that's pretty much it. I mean, at some point, you look back and you think, how many times have you had to defend yourself and it worked? And the answer is, well, counting the next time, it might be one. It doesn't work. And so save your energy and keep it minimal. It's what we call gray rock. And I don't mean to be passive aggressive. What I am saying is, let's just be realistic. They don't want to hear from you. So I'm not going to give them a whole lot to work with. And then when they, let's say they say, well, Aunt Mabel didn't make it this year. I don't know what's wrong with her. Why she didn't come. Of course, she's always in an anxious mood anyway. Who cares? You might want to say something like, actually, I enjoy Aunt Mabel's. I enjoy her company. I like her. I remember so well. One person was telling me that he was with his in-laws, and there was one member of the in-laws family that was a little too different and just didn't think the same and didn't present the same. And that person was there, and sure enough, the entire family ignored that one person. And then this one fella said, and he told me, he said, what I did is I noticed that person sitting on the couch by herself. I just went over and spent some time, and we wound up talking for over an hour. And it was very delightful. And I made sure that I took care of her, and I got her some food, and I helped out. And I wound up enjoying her company. And he understood that there was a whole system there that was narcissistic. Give yourself permission to be different. And whatever you do, you don't need to defend yourself. And frankly, if that narcissistic individual keeps coming with all this criticism, you might even want to go so far as to say, I know that these things that you're complaining about are important to you, but I'm just going to be real honest. That's not something that I really need to hear. And confront, but notice my tone of voice and notice my mindset. I'm not going to shame them. I'm not going to come after them with knives out. I'm just going to let it be known, no, we think differently, and if you want to keep your thoughts to yourself, that would be okay with me. And say it. And you might think, well, I don't know if I can do that. Well, you can, and just be true to yourself. So when that person tries to hijack the holidays, it's like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to play along. Okay. Speaking of which, let's go to the next question. This person says, it can be difficult to be strong and not take it personally when someone hurls insults at you. I've never had anyone but the narcissistic ex speak to me like that. I feel so deflated. Where do they get off thinking that they can talk to you like that? Now, again, see, we go back and my opening thought, narcissists don't process life the same as you. Um, when a narcissist comes at you with all of this harshness and criticism and agitation, it's their way of saying, I really feel good about myself when I can make someone feel bad about themselves. And I'm actually, I have some notes. I've got a big stack of papers here on notes or videos I'm going to do. And one of them is going to be on a narcissist bad psychological math. Me making insults equals a good time for myself, my self-esteem. And it's like that math doesn't compute. Well, there's a whole lot of other things like that. And basically, when the person wants to hurl insults at you, and I know this sounds very standard for someone like me to say, but it's so accurate. They're saying a whole lot more about who they are than about who you are. So if they say you make no sense, or I can't count on you to understand anything, or you're too dense, or I don't know why anybody would want to pay any attention to you, what they're saying is I'm rude, I'm mean spirited, I have no empathy, I'm condescending, I have no willingness to try to meet people where they are. That's who I am. That's the major message. Now they want you to think you're an idiot, you're a dunce, and all the rest. But remind yourself that the insult speaks much more about the one who gives it than the one who receives it. And then this implies that you're going to need to learn how to have a detached kind of objectivity. You mentioned that there are a lot of other individuals who think well of you, and you don't want to give your power over to that one person. And so, whenever you're going to be in the presence of that one individual, then you want to rehearse in advance. Okay, what are some of the insults I'm probably going to have? And it's okay to talk with yourself. In fact, we would do this in therapy. Okay, let's kind of role play. Let's figure out where you want to go and what your thoughts are, what triggers you, and what your alternatives would be. And that's what the change process is all about. Having awareness of where they are and where they're coming from, who you are, what your truth is about yourself. And I'm saying this in a very abbreviated kind of way. I know that many times it's helpful to go ahead and say, well, I'm going to enter into that therapeutic process, particularly if the emotion is very strong and persistent, so that I can get that objectivity. But the key for you is to be objective, not subjective, and to remind yourself the narcissist is desperate for me to allow them to have space in my head rent free, and I'm not going to let them have that. And so I'm going to take that as one person who has one set of beliefs and attitudes. And if that doesn't match pitch with what my well-conceived thinking comes up with, then I'm not going to give it too much more thought. And it's easier said than done. But your task is to remind yourself they operate with emotional chaos. That's what they have to offer. I have emotional steadiness, and that's what I have to offer. Between the two, which one makes the most sense? And you make your selection that way. And again, I know that's a simple way to put it, but make sure that you do trust in your own willingness to make those adjustments. Now, this next one, and this one's a little scary. And if you're on the receiving end of something like this, I hope that you can just see it as the large red flag. But this person just says, my partner told me that he wanted me to fear him. He was so in my face, he was whispering in my ear, I want you to fear me. What does he think? What does he think he's going to accomplish? Great question. First, my reaction is that's a sick person. Plain and simple. I want you to fear me right in your face or right up in your ear. And there's there's a hyper controlling Machiavellian kind of an attitude there. I'm so manipulative toward you. And part of me, if I'm on the receiving end of that, I'm thinking, okay, I do fear you to the extent that I don't trust you. And I don't think you have good intentions. And if fear means that I find you to be untrustworthy and I don't want to be around you, that's where I am. Fear does not mean that you have to be paralyzed. And when somebody comes along with you, toward you, and gives you that kind of harsh and cruel and manipulative message, I mean, there's almost a sadistic element that implies. I'm going to guess that's what we're talking about. In other words, they enjoy seeing you feel pain. They get a thrill out of that. That's somebody that you don't need to be with. And uh, what makes me think even further is that this is a person who himself is operating from his own place of pain. Where does a person learn to think that way? And inevitably, it's called modeling. They got it modeled from somewhere. Now, it's really easy to point the finger at mom and dad, and maybe that's where they learned it. Or I talked with one man recently who said, "Well, actually, my parents were pretty nice, but I had an older brother who was 5 years older and just tormented the daylights out of me, and so it may have been a sibling." It may have been a peer group. I don't know. It may have been a system that person joined in with, and they taught that's how we think here. But there's a brokenness that implies when someone says, "If I can make you fear me, and I'm going to get in your ear and I'm going to say it softly but meanly, you will fear me," then that's somebody that you don't need to have contact with. And I'm hoping that if this is somebody that you're attached with, let's say in a permanent type of relationship, that you can start looking for the exit. Because if somebody is that calloused in the way that they engage with you, usually there's a pretty low level of probability that they're going to learn to think like normal people. And so I'd let it be known. Okay, I hear that's your goal, and then inwardly I'm thinking I'm going to need to make other plans, because you see, when you start fearing that other person, that means you cease trusting yourself. And so what you want, because fear is all about conflict over the issue of trust. I trust myself, which means that my fear of that other individual is not going to be so all consuming that I can't make my own decisions. And so that's where you go back and ask, what does my self trusting inner voice tell me to do? And then let's operate on that. That person doesn't need to be in your inner circle at all, period, into discussion. And so I don't want to talk with such definitiveness where I say no, that person is completely beyond redemption. But some folks, they prove after many discussions, they prove to be just that. Now, a very simple question. You've heard me use the term psychological laziness. This person asked the question, why do narcissists have psychological laziness? Okay, that's a great question. Um, okay, what's the opposite of laziness? Initiative or forward moving, open mindedness. Um, Narcissists, let's keep in mind, at the very core of their being, are terribly selfish. It's like, well, let's see, there's about 8 billion people on the planet. And if there's one person that needs to decide what the ultimate good is, how about that? It's me. And so they convince themselves, out of all of the billions of people on the planet, the only person I need to listen to is me. All right, just break that down. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? As opposed to, well, there's me, I've got my thoughts, but there are a whole lot of other individuals out there I could probably learn by opening myself up to others. But then the thought there is, well, I don't know, that might require work. Okay, there's the opposite of laziness. That might require adjustment. I don't know if I want to do that. And so in their need to be in control, they've just declared, I'm a finished product. Or if you don't like the way I do things, tough. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, then either you conform or you just go somewhere else. And the healthy person says, well, why don't we approach our relationships with a sense of planning? Why don't we approach our relationships with empathy? Why don't we approach our relationships with patience and what I refer to as higher priorities, where we look out for one another? We have a healthy sense of curiosity. And that narcissistic person says, why don't we build our relationship on my instincts? And why don't we just flow with the mood of the moment, my mood of the moment? And I don't feel the need to think about context or nuance. I don't feel the need for future thinking. In other words, I don't care where this is going in the next hour or days or weeks or months. I don't have any need for analytical thinking. That's who I am. And so, they prefer psychological laziness because it's their own form of control. In fact, have contended for decades now, probably the most controlling person is the passive aggressive, because they're so darn stubborn that you can't move them off of anything. And laziness is its own form of passive aggressiveness. And so, for the narcissist, like, well, if control is my goal and laziness is a way to get there, works for me. I don't care about you. And it's just in that one act of laziness, there are so many other elements that are just not normal. And that's where we say, they don't process life like you or like me. Okay. So another person asked the question, so are covert narcissists basically introverts and are overt narcissists basically extroverts? What do you think? Now, my answer is nope, not at all. Now, sure enough, we do have a subcategory of covert narcissism that we refer to as the vulnerable narcissist, and there are some individuals who are covert in their narcissism. The vulnerable narcissist is the one that when you're around them, they're very likely to be moody and withdrawn, and they're the kind of person that more or less sits off to themselves a lot, and in their mind they're criticizing anybody and everybody, and they just have this feeling of I don't really I don't think I can be with you people. There's a deep sense of inadequacy that they carry, that, and often these individuals are prone towards depression and anxiety, but they disguise it as criticism. It's like, the reason I don't like to be around you is because none of you think right. And so the vulnerable narcissist can be very predictably, they're covert, and then they're also strongly introverted. Now, having said that, there are a lot of covert narcissists who can be very friendly and very extroverted. I've had so many people that will talk about that person who turned out to be much more narcissistic than they really realized, and they'll say, "Yeah, for the longest time, that person was helpful, and they would call me to check on me, and they were just really engaging, and I really thought that I had a good friend." And then something snapped, and a selfishness that I did not see showed up. And so they can have this extroverted veneer, but the narcissism is covert in the sense that they just don't show it to you. So covert doesn't necessarily mean that you're an introvert. Or I've had some overt narcissists who are strongly introverted. For example, let's suppose that you have an individual that doesn't like to go out and be around people. They don't like to share and be open, and they just rather keep to themselves. That would be part of the introversion. But within 5 minutes, you realize, oh, this person is as narcissistic as the day is long, grumpy and impossible to please, and bossy and agitated. And so we can't just stereotype and say all extroverted people, if they're going to be narcissists, overt. All introverted people, if they're going to be narcissists, covert. It's much more of a mixture, and it's much more complex than that. And so let's make sure that we don't think in broad stereotypes with respect to that. And that's what makes the study of this topic so interesting, because there's so many varieties. There's two phrases I like to use: we're all alike, and we're each unique. We all can have certain proclivities in the negative and positive, but we're very unique in the way that we can display it. Okay. Okay. Now, having said that, this next question, I put this right here next to it. This person asked the question: do all narcissists follow the same script? The person I know also keeps saying, "I'm not angry, I'm just feeling frustrated," while escalating with very rude nonverbal cues and the voice is rising. And so I just mentioned they can each come at you from very different angles, but then at the same time, there are certain core patterns that they tend to fall into that are highly predictable. So that's what makes this whole thing so, you know, go figure, so intriguing as we try to figure things out. Sure enough, when this person says my narcissistic person says, "Well, I don't have anger issues. Sometimes I feel frustrated." Well, you know what they're saying? I'm not very well educated on the nature of anger, because frustration is a form of anger. You're not screaming and shouting and slamming doors, But if there's an irritability and agitation, frustration, that can be its own muffled form of anger. And so they're just simply saying, well, I just look at anger in a very stereotypical kind of way. Um, Many of you know that one of the ways that I wound up becoming more expert in the field of narcissism is that I spent decades giving anger workshops, and I've written books on the topic of anger. And part of the reason that I developed my expertise in narcissism is whenever I would deal with angry individuals in moments of conflict, I would see all of the characteristics: control and lack of empathy and superiority and stubbornness and defensiveness and the false self and the alternate reality. And finally, over time, it hit me. I'm dealing with narcissism. But many times, narcissists can have their frustration and agitation, and they just have a very poor understanding. In my workshops, I would actually have all these little charts that I would have people go through: open aggression, passive aggression, suppressing, and all. In this particular workshop, I had in the first session about 75 different ways that anger could play out. So it's not a one-dimensional thing at all, and it's fascinating to see this many kind of ways. So basically, when a person says, I'm not angry, but I just feel frustrated, what they're saying is, I'm just not very keen on understanding emotions. I'm not very skilled at knowing how to manage conflicts. I've never really learned listening skills. I don't really care about it. And so we go back to that psychological laziness. I've never really taken the time to even think about what my statement says. And so consider the source, and then they go into their blame shifting and all the rest. Consider the source, and then realize, well, you may not think of yourself as being an angry individual. I see it for what it is, and I'm going to make my adjustments accordingly. The more you have the knowledge and the awareness, maybe you can't make that other person have insight and you can't make them change, but you can certainly adjust your responses based on your own awareness of what's going on in that person and then in yourself. Okay. Okay. Now, here's another one. This person, and this again goes back to how narcissists think differently from you. They don't process life the same. This person says, why does the narcissist give you the silent treatment when you assert your boundaries? And why does it feel like I'm going crazy and questioning myself internally because of the blame shifting? Okay. Now, let's keep in mind a couple of things. First, let's remind ourselves what it means to have boundaries. And repeatedly, I'll mention to you, and I hope that this is something that just gets deeply embedded in your thinking. Boundaries is much more than just knowing how to tell a person no. Boundaries starts with having a very clear definition of who you are. I intend to be a person of respect, or I intend to be a person that operates with understanding or decisiveness, and I know how I want to approach projects or how I want to manage my priorities and preferences. And I've got a pretty good handle on it, and I feel like I'm doing so in such a way where my healthiness is going to benefit someone else. And so, when you have a good definition of what it means to be a healthy, strong you, that's the beginning point of boundaries. So the narcissist can come along with all of their unhealthiness and say, well, actually, it's all about me. And I need to tell you what's wrong with you. And I need for you to drop this and do this instead. Yeah, sometimes it's going to require you to say no, but ultimately what you're doing is you're saying yes to yourself. Well, I know that that's where you're coming from, but I've thought through who I am, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed with my own initiatives taking over. And it's not you being controlling; it's just you exercising your free choice in a healthy kind of way. And the narcissist can think, oh, "Wait a minute, you can't do that." And what it reveals is they're thinking, but it's all about me. I don't coordinate. I don't want to listen. I don't want to bend, and I don't want to, try to understand where you're coming from. That's gross. And so when it says the narcissist gives you the silent treatment when you assert their boundaries, they're throwing a little passive aggressive temper tantrum. And my response is, let them. Uh, you can't control what they're going to do anyway. And it's like, well, I'll give you an illustration. Our little 6-year-old granddaughter has a 1-year-old, 14-month-old little sister. And sometimes the little sister cries. Now, actually, both of them have really sweet dispositions, but 14 months old, something goes wrong, they just cry because they don't know how to say, "Hey, I'm frustrated." And you know what the 6-year-old often does? She's so accustomed to it that she just kind of goes on with her day and just keeps on doing it. And mom takes care of it. And so it's like, I'm not going to be fazed by this. I'm just going to keep on with my day. That's what little kids do. It's like, yeah, 14 months old, they whine, and then they'll get over it. Well, sometimes you have to do that with a 42-year-old. And the 42-year-old is over there whining, and I didn't get my way, and then things didn't go my way. You set boundaries. It's like, yeah, I know. I'm gonna keep going ahead and be what I'm going to be. And it just illustrates how deeply insecure they are. It's like, I can't let you be you. You have to be a mini version of me. And it also illustrates how shallow they are in their thinking. They don't have analytical thinking at all, and consider the source and move on. Okay, I've got one more question here, and this is kind of a big one. And I know that some of you have dealt with this, and I wanted to make sure I got this in before we ran out of time. This person says, would you address narcissists and their sexual demands? My husband was never happy about our sexual relations. He would often ask me out of the blue, when is our sex life ever going to get better? He would keep track of how many times we had sex and throw it in my face. He didn't understand that after grilling me that day, I certainly didn't feel like being intimate with him. It hurt me so much and made me feel like a failure in the bedroom. I actually remember a woman who came to my counseling office, and she had actually found a little calendar that her husband kept, and he would put a gold star next to the days where he got sex from her, presumably. I guess that's who it was with. And she just felt used and demeaned by that. So this person says, my husband, and she's kind of talking like it's an ex now, just had all these sexual demands. Again, narcissists tend not to think analytically, but let's ask an analytical question, and that is, what's the purpose of sex? What's the meaning behind it? Now, obviously, we have the procreation part when you're trying to bring children into the world, but beyond that, what are we hoping to gain? Well, in its best case, it's affirmation. It's tuning in. It means that you're saying, I want you to have a feeling of pleasure, and I want you to have a feeling of affirmation that I'm in your life with you. And I want to make sure that this is something that says we have something very special between us that we share with no one else, but there's a goodness that we have to offer. And when we're finished, that we actually feel like there's a goodness and a decency that has come through. And so we're talking about connecting at a heart level. How heart level are narcissists? Basically, they're functional. And to them, sex is a function. I want what I want. I want to get off, and I want to have my jollies. And it's not bad to say I want to have pleasure in the middle of sex. Well, of course, that's why it's there. It's nice to have pleasure. But the narcissist says, the reason we have sex is because I have an agenda, and you happen to be useful in the moment because you're gonna satisfy my agenda, and that's it. They're transactional. And in sexuality, it's one of the most egregious ways for a narcissist to show a demeaning attitude because it's such a personal decision. I'm one of these that doesn't take sex lightly. And I think it's something that we need to think through very carefully, that it's not just something that's, easy come, easy go, but it has a real depth to it. I mean, there's a form of attachment that is there no matter who that person is when sexual relations are engaged in. And so the narcissist is like, well, my starting point is all about me. What are you going to do for me? And so when you think it makes me feel demeaned, I get it. You're not wrong to feel that way. But let's pull back and take a look at the larger picture and say it illustrates that you're dealing with somebody who has no understanding at all of the notion of love. They don't have any sense of humility as they approach such a delicate topic. They don't have any patience. They don't have any sense of affirmation. It's like, gimme, gimme, gimme. And that's pretty much where they're coming from. Consider that as part of what you've been dealing with, and then make your adjustments accordingly. So we're going to close here for the day. And the theme that we have is to remind ourselves, narcissists don't process life the way that you would, I hope, as a healthy individual. And rather than thinking, I've got to get them over here into the healthy camp. Well, actually, there's a reverse flow of counter control. They want to control me, but I wish I could control them. And we're not going to go into that space. Yes, you can speak up and state your boundaries and state your convictions, but with the idea that says if you're going to choose to continue on your own separate path, distinct from where I am, go your own way. You can go your own way. I don't have to follow you. I'm going to go my way too. And I'm going to go the way of love and goodness and decency. It would be nice if others could join me, but if not, I don't want to get down into the cesspool with somebody who doesn't know how to do life very well. So, Team Healthy, stay on your course. Know who you're dealing with, and know the meaning of the word yes when you're saying yes to your own goodness. Okay. Now, I know that you're here because you want to grow and that you want to be a better person. Know that when I see that you're here encouraging one another in the chat, you're encouraging each other in the comment sections, know that that stimulates me. And I so appreciate being a part of Team Healthy with you. So keep being who you are and keep growing. And then I'm going to keep pulling the questions out that you all throw them in my direction. I'll meet with you same time, same station next week. I hope you have a good week between now and then, and know that I deeply appreciate Team Healthy. Thanks, guys. Bye.